The brain is absolutely ridiculous and one of the least understood aspects of the natural kingdom. We don't even understand how the brain of a worm works, so how on earth are we meant to comprehend our own evolved grey matter? Psychology has only been officially studied for around 130 years and we're still making huge discoveries each year. My mum's a psychologist, so I grew up hearing about all this stuff and I really took for granted some of the things I learned. So like any responsible millennial, I decided to start a podcast about it and share the sweet, sweet gift of therapy. I'm sat on the couch with my mum, Sandy. She's a psychologist with over 20 years experience studying and treating clients. Hi mum.
Hi Adam.
We're going to release a new episode each week talking about a different aspect of mental health and therapy, and hopefully some of you will find it useful. All of our episodes are on the YouTubes if you want to watch us actually sit on our sofa in our living room next to the fire. We put 2 new logs on. It's really cozy. And the link is going to be in our Instagram bio at OnTheSofaPod. So go give us a follow if you like the podcast. Share it with your friends. Rate us 5 stars. Subscribe on YouTube. This week, well this month, we're going to be talking about confidence and insecurity and self-esteem. Right? So this week we're going to be covering personal insecurities, so not insecurities in like your relationship, just things that are
personal,
a bit more personal.
Okay, so one that I certainly come across a lot is jealousy, and jealousy that somebody has, like that's generally part of who they are, is very closely connected to somebody who's very insecure.
Okay.
So they're dissatisfied with their own life in some way. And insecurity is also when you look to other people to try and repair that insecurity, and it isn't their job, it's your job.
Got you.
All right. So it promotes, insecurity promotes a feeling of inadequacy, that they know it,
that they're not enough,
I'm not good enough.
Got you.
And then this can lead to symptoms of anxiety.
Okay, so this would be so anxiety would be the symptom, but the cause would be this underlying insecurity.
Yeah. So that can trickle into your goals, for your career goals, your relationships, and the ability to move through life in a healthy way. Can you see how that would happen? Insecurity might not be from childhood, but it could be from childhood. It could also be from a later trauma, and it's kind of created some kind of destabling effect on the person. Loneliness, rejection, failure, negative beliefs about yourself. So they might have had a caregiver that really just said negative things to them all the time. And I know it's hard to believe, but that happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
Even to little children, you know. Even if you walk through the park, I remember walking through the park ages and ages ago, and I always tell this story that there was this little boy, lovely little boy, and he fell over onto that horrible gravel stuff, and it really hurts, and it was bleeding, and it really hurt he had little shorts on, and both of his parents almost simultaneously said, "Johnny, get up and stop crying, for goodness sake. It doesn't hurt." So they're telling him it doesn't hurt, and he's crying and he's bleeding. So he stops crying and then just goes like that. And he's learned there's another message: do not get emotional. So cut your feelings off. Taking us back to that person-centred
But it's such a simple thing that Johnny's parents could have been having a bad day. They could have just had a really big argument, and then they've got the kid wailing in the background, and they're like, "Look, give us a minute, like, stop crying," and that could have caused so much damage.
Well, that's a really good way to look at it, and I didn't at the time even think about that. I just thought that's probably a reinforcement of what he's growing up in, and so that what you've just said is a good point. That might have been a one-off, but most parents wouldn't react I don't think in that way, because you have this, like, I think for your children you have enhanced empathy, what we call
Definitely.
enhanced empathy.
Yeah.
And, like, if either of you two, even now as big as you are, if you've hurt something and I can see it, I can feel it. Almost I can feel, and I often go, like, you know, react to that.
Yeah.
So for me to see parents simultaneously doing that
made
me think, wow.
But that could then make that child insecure, you say.
Yeah. So think of all the ramifications of what if. I'm just making sure I'm sticking to the right subject here. So little Johnny has these reinforced negative comments made to him, and he feels quite worthless because of that. He's already cut off his emotional self as a defence mechanism. This is done unconsciously through the brain, as we've discussed previously. And so when he grows up, he might, because of his dismissive attachments, going back to
our previous last month,
he might crave for somebody that's really motherly and enter into a relationship like that. Alternatively, he might turn into the angry child,
because he gets attention when he got angry,
and he might be one of those individuals that takes his anger out on his partner, both verbally and physically, because that's what happened to him, you know.
Completely. Do you think that there's a few things I want to touch on today, but one of them is that insecurity can actually be bred from a positive relationship too? And by that I mean, like, for example, say someone as a child was told, oh no, you don't need to do that, like, I'll do that. Or like, don't worry about learning how to fix that thing, because daddy will fix it, or your brother will fix it, or whatever. And then you get older and you are left with this belief that you can't do things. Like, you can't wash the car, you can't clean, you can't fix the whatever, you can't fix the table, because that isn't, you don't need to do that, you don't need to worry about that. And that can leave you feeling insecure and, like, not invaluable, but like you don't have the ability, insecure in your own ability.
Yeah, well, I can see that. Because it's almost like a disabling thing, isn't it? A parent, potentially, has made you feel disabled when you're not disabled.
Out of love, you know, don't worry about doing that, mummy will do it instead.
Yeah.
But it takes that power away from you.
I mean, you see this a lot in situations with a child that might have some kind of medical difficulty, and I'm not going to say like mega serious, but sort of, I don't know, think of something that's not
minor, broken arm or something.
Yeah.
Or even less.
Well, just they might have a minor medical condition that's ongoing or has occurred, or the baby might have been premature. That's a good example. And so the parent can become overprotective, and you can see why.
Completely.
And you can totally understand why. But that affects the development, that can affect the development of that child. So they potentially, like you've just said, they could grow up thinking, because then they're not allowed to really do much, because the parents like, oh, you don't need to do this, you don't need to do that, oh, you don't need to learn how to cook,
oh, don't worry about getting the bus, I'll just drive you in. Things like that.
Yeah, perfect example. Well, what happens to that child when he or she is dropped off at university? They're completely and utterly disabled.
Yeah.
Max, who's sitting over there doing the cameras, he relayed some stories to me recently about how surprised he was that people couldn't cook.
Very common, super common.
You know.
But then your parents are doing that out of love for you. They don't want you to have to worry. Don't worry about it. But actually, it's could cause you these insecurities later. Something else that I want to touch on quickly today is something that's, I think, unfortunately on the rise and is really common is like probably a lot to blame, social media is to blame for a lot of it, but physical insecurity. There's an insecurity about the way you look, and obviously serious end of things like body dysmorphia, but like a physical insecurity in your appearance or your voice or whatever it is. Where does that tend to come from, and how does it manifest?
Okay. So, as you know, I work with a lot of people that are quite famous, and I remember working closely with a sports person who he did have quite a happy, secure childhood. No issues there. However, and I'm not going to name the sport or anything like that because everything's confidential. But I later found out that this is normal behaviour in the changing rooms in most sports, really. But for some reason, they really did pick on him and make fun of his body in the changing room. I mean, they were young adults.
So it's just joking around, locker room banter kind of thing.
However, with this young person, we later discovered that his... I'm trying to do this quite sort of logically. His mother, when she was pregnant, experienced extreme trauma, which we've talked about this before. Making a template in the baby. The biochemicals crossed the placenta and created the template. Okay. So he was, although he had a lovely, very protective upbringing, because of what his mother had been through, etc. He was then, unbeknown to everyone, vulnerable to criticism. Right. Even banter. Because he wasn't used to any of that.
Because he was so protected as a child. Right.
Mollycoddled, more or less. And he didn't have the mechanisms to internalise that accurately.
Right. So he would take it to heart.
He took it completely to heart and developed a chronic case of dysmorphia, body dysmorphia, and started having various operations to try and
rectify those issues that he saw. Yeah. Okay. And how else can body dysmorphia sort of manifest? Like, what can that cause if you start, look in the mirror and seeing? I mean, we all do it, but people say, "Oh, you look really nice again." "Oh, I don't look." "No, I don't. I definitely don't." And that's obviously a very minor case of feeling insecure about the way you look. But how can it get worse? What other things can this cause?
How can it get? It can get worse through peers, can't it?
Pointing things out.
By society's media, it can get worse because the pressure's on to look a certain way, and when you think about impact, it can be as big or as little as you like. But for a young teenage girl that feels pressurised to be the same size as one of her peers, who has a completely different metabolism, she may get involved in eating disorders, and then of course you starve the brain of nutrients.
And then we go back to bio first: water, food, sleep, exercise.
Yeah.
You don't have the energy to exercise. You're starving the brain of nutrients to create serotonin,
and the body starts to produce hairs on the arms, etc., to keep warm, and her cycles stop. So the body's starting to really shut down. And because of evolution, because there were times in tribes where they would hunt and not get food, and so this growing of the hairs on the arms on women, particularly,
a very good survival technique.
It's a survival technique. But some of the worst cases, sadly, that I've encountered, they then develop paranoia, delusions, because the brain is starving. and it's struggling to cope. And in the worst case scenarios, the heart gives up.
Unfortunately, of course, if you're not feeding it. So what can start with something as simple as having a joke around in the locker room with your friends can really develop into something super serious.
Super serious.
Just quickly, how do you, if you are someone who struggles with insecurity like that, maybe not to that level, I think at that level you probably should see a therapist or go and see your GP, of course, but if you are someone who looks in the mirror and goes, oh, I hate the way I look, what are some really nice, easy things you can do at home, or some good techniques to kind of tackle it?
So I'm not a fitness person, but from the mind's perspective, I've got this thing at work which is for children, but I've modified it for adults. It's really good. It's like a circle, and a big circle, and then inside the big circle is a little circle, and it's really simple. It says, I call it the control wheel. Don't look that up on Google because it brings up domestic violence, and it's nothing to do with that. So it says, what is in my control? And so I get people to write things. What is in my control? What I eat, how I live, how I sleep, how I socialise.
Right.
And then on the outside it says things that are not within my control. What people think of me. So my friend at school thinks I'm fat. The boys in the locker room make fun of me, so they must be right. So the way they think, I can't control that. The way they behave towards me, I can't control that. So it's writing all these things down, and they're not going to come in your head straight away. Just draw it out and then notice. So something like your body, what's within my control with my body, and what's realistic, and how do I want that to be? So very goal orientated and very CBT this is.
Yeah. Do you think though that could be dangerous? Because if someone thinks that they're fat when they're not fat, or they're overweight and they're not overweight, they could be like, well, I want to be slimmer, and then you do these techniques and you're actually like, you're very easy to lose weight if you really want to lose weight, and actually the problem isn't, you don't need to lose weight at all, you're a healthy weight. Is there any way to like build confidence in that area?
So you mean somebody that
maybe has minor body dysmorphia, which I think like most people probably struggle with in some point, where so, oh, my hair looks terrible today, and everyone else is just like, your hair looks exactly the same as it looks every day. What's ways to build your confidence in yourself that actually it doesn't matter and you do look healthy, you look good?
No, it's quite a hard question actually.
Is it?
I think so, because the only thing I can think of is try and learn to accept yourself for how you are and what you look like, and try and love yourself a bit more, really, because listen, you're only here once, and you personally can make it as hard or as good as you want to make it, hopefully. And yes, external things nearly always impact on our lives, but you have to try and learn how to buffer them. And yes, you might fall down and crash for a day, a month, a week, or whatever, but you've got to learn to get resilient and
pick yourself back
bounce
up.
back.
Yeah.
I fall down quite badly sometimes, but I know that I will bounce back.
You just got to do the basics right,
and it's remembering that I am going to bounce back. I'm going to recover from this. So I suppose it's self-talk, isn't it?
Positive self-talk.
Positive self-talk is like the bee's knees.
Sounds silly, by the way, but it does really, really work.
It does really, really work.
And that's a lovely place, I think, to call it today.
Okay.
That was all about personal insecurity. Next week we're going to talk about relationship insecurities, which is a really big one, I think, like doubting your partner or doubting commitment and things like that.
Okay.
Thanks very much for watching. If you don't follow us on Instagram @OnTheSofaPod, and we'll see you next week for another fun episode.